Here we go. Okay, welcome everyone. So we're on lesson 7, which is composition. So some of you guys are also taking the watercolor class at Ollie, and so you guys get a double dose of composition this month, which I think is good. But I've got it's slightly different for us because we're drawing and not painting, and we have maybe a little bit more time even to go into depth. So there'll be some repetition of concepts, but I try to include some new things as well. So the first thing we're going to do today is go over homework. We have about maybe 15, 20 minutes to go over homework I allotted for us. And that way we've got a lot of time left to get into composition and a little bit on perspective and scale, and especially with regards to buildings. So for those of you who want to know how to design a better drawing or design a better drawing that leads to your painting on it, or for somebody who maybe doesn't know how to draw buildings or has had trouble drawing buildings in the past, we will have a bit of focus on that this lesson and then also more going forward. So we've got some loop backs, as I had mentioned before. So, so what will you need today? Like the same as before, pencil mainly. I don't think we're going to use charcoal today. If you want to, you can. I'm going to use pencil. If you have a straight edge, like a ruler, that's great. But if you don't have a ruler, if you just use the straight edge of another piece of paper or something like that, that's fine too. I didn't put a ruler in the supplies, so I don't know if everyone has a ruler or a protractor or something else like that. I mean, you could use a piece of cardboard or the edge of a box or a postcard. So that'll be helpful when we do some of the framing and perspective drawing. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today. So let's do a quick review of last lesson, which was gesture and drawing the human figure using a line of action. So a very kind of specific way of drawing the human figure, and then combining that with contour and with shading. And it gave you guys a lot of homework, but I also gave you an option to do half the homework or full homework, right? 10 drawings times 3 or 20 drawings times 3 or somewhere in the middle. So maybe some of you guys, I also gave you 22 figures, by the way, because some of them were repeated figures we had done before, which I thought you may or may not be keen on, you know. And then also timing them and switching the materials. So giving you a chance to utilize different materials and kind of seeing how your hand worked with your brain when you were doing that. And so I'm curious to know, I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of hands. I think that we'll have time to maybe take 5 hands, but if you guys are succinct, we could take more hands. So, because I think we could spend this whole time like debriefing the gesture drawing. I know people are hard. So I'd like to hear from some different folks this time. So I'm going to come to Ginny. If you showed a lot last time, or you did maybe think about, is there one specific thing you want to share? If you haven't shared before, we'd like to hear from you. Ginny?
Okay. Well, after doing 60 of these, I realized that what it means to me is a beginning of how to make the shapes good. So,
Good.
and the easiest for me was the painting because it flows easiest.
Yeah.
So here, oops. So these, for example, are the
Oh,
paint.
so nice.
But
Those are great.
Yeah, but it got at the end, I was like so tired of it. I forgot the lines and everything, and I just went my old way.
But you should be able to do that because you've like built some of
Mhm.
it into your brain in all those 40 previous drawings. That was the whole point. That was the point. And that's why I said try not to do the dots at this point. You might not need them, as an option. But I do notice also that you used 2 different parts of your brush when you did the drawing. So you used the flat belly of your brush to do the shading, which really speeds things up.
Well, let me tell you, 4 minutes was not enough. I have like one leg done in certain things, like, and that's another thing is learning to make it go, just don't worry about what it looks like, just do it.
Exactly. Yeah. When you do online drawing classes with the drawing school, they give you 2 minutes. They start, sometimes some of them will ask and they'll start with 1 minute. So 4 minutes is actually, even though it doesn't feel like a lot, it was pretty generous. And as you join these drawing classes, you'll see like it's really about just capturing the essence. Sometimes you leave out the legs, sometimes you just draw the hips. Sometimes it's the most important part of that gesture that you see. And that's why when we were doing them timed, I said, stop. Wherever you are, we stop, we change. Because what you might learn over that is like, okay, I don't need the hands, the feet, the face. I don't even need the whole torso. I might just want to do the part that seems to embody the gesture the most, like the swing of the hips, for example. So,
Well, and I can't wait to see how you figure out to do, the man at the end with his legs all over the place.
did I do that one? Okay, I look.
No, I can't wait to see how to do that because the biggest problem I had is made the torso too long and I don't know exactly where to put the hips.
I don't think I did him. I'll be honest. I did this one.
Well, that's really good, but I want to see the one with the guy with his feet up in the air. Oh my goodness.
All right, if you guys, anyone who wants to stay on after, if I can find it, I'll do it. And if not, I'll put up a video on it, I promise.
Okay.
Thanks for sharing, Ginny. That was great learning. All right, and then I see Minnie. Minnie, do you want to unmute? I'll come to you. Okay. Hi, Minnie. Figured out how to use your hand. Thank you. We still can't hear you.
You're muted.
Good.
Okay, I really loved all the exercises. And I see where it was a progression. You know,
Nice.
I enjoyed the pencil. And I see how it was, important to get to the next steps. And then the painting was so easy to do
Yeah.
because, from all the other things,
Right.
you could just do a brush stroke.
Yeah, it becomes internalized and almost like second nature at that point. But like what it also can do is it can build in bad habits too, right? So like some of you before we actually officially started, we're talking about how maybe they put the hips in the wrong place, too low, and then over time didn't realize it, and so like kept putting them in the wrong place. So I should have said to stop and sort of assess your work in between. Some of you just did that, but going forward, that's something to think about too, right? You're reinforcing the good habit. I don't mean you specifically, Minnie. I'm just using
Right.
time. So to use that time to build in your good habits, but also sort of make sure you don't build in any bad ones.
I found that the man was the most difficult. I was really frustrated with him.
Was it because it's closed postures instead of open ones?
Yeah, felt like I wasn't getting any of the proportions. Like he looked crazy to me all the time. And then I thought I would do contour drawing because he was
Ooh,
frustrated.
yeah, that's wonderful. Oh, sorry. I spotted myself when I said ooh. Wonderful. See, that's an amazing contour drawing because you really get the feeling of the gesture in that.
And this was the upside down one. And it looked really kooky too.
Remember, did I do that one? Oh yeah, I did do that one, you guys. I think this is one of the ones. Maybe this isn't the one you're talking about, Ginny, but I did do a few of them.
Yeah, how on earth would you even start that? Wow.
Started it the same way as the other ones, but there was more overlapping shapes. So remember when we first started doing the line of action and you guys said they all look the same. And I said, that's because she's standing up and, so her line of action is pretty much the same in all of these. And I thought, oh, they're going to think these gestures are boring because she's not, doing this, and this. But I think the most common figures that we're usually sketching as part of our, I don't know, our hobby of sketching is like putting a figure into a scene or having a scene revolve around a figure and or having someone sitting down on a bench or something like that. So that those are the shapes I wanted you guys to get practice with. I know that the closed shapes are harder, but now you have a little bit more practice with them.
Mhm.
Anybody else feel like sharing? We got a few minutes. Anyone have any real troubles?
I struggled through it and I kind of gave it up. So I looked at your video a couple of times and on just how to do the 4 minute one, not the whole thing. And I still struggled. So I will be working on it as I go. So.
All right, keep practicing, you guys. This is also not the only way to draw a person, right? There are a lot of different ways to draw them, including using your shape method or just pure sighting and contour. So there's different approaches. And maybe if this one was hard for some of you, maybe a different method might be easier. So I gave you guys different artists to go take a look at because there's continuing ed from this class, right? This isn't an ongoing class, but it could be because there's so much to learn, even just from figure drawing. So some of those links that I sent you, you might like the way those folks approach things better. Okay, Diane.
I started out with a charcoal and it was so messy. I used the vine and I was breaking all the time because I was pressing so hard. And it was really frustrating. So I switched to charcoal pencil and it was much better.
Harder to erase though.
Oh yeah. I mean, I didn't even try. I didn't even try to erase anything. I just went over stuff. I didn't try to erase anything. And I kind of thought by the time I got to the pen and the ink, pen and the paint, I found all the dots in my way.
Mm.
Not that I did a good job, but I just found I was a little frustrated with them. But I don't know.
Yeah, they don't maybe necessarily work for everyone, but maybe they were even at some point just a little bit internalized for you. So knowing that's where the joints
Mhm.
are, if you know it in your brain, and then you could maybe even are just like thinking about it a little bit rather than drawing them. And I could see that.
When I did the watercolor, I didn't do very many, but I found I started out completely differently. I started out with just the round of the shoulders and the waist
Mhm.
and that torso. That's all. And then from there I could build, but it
And
was really hard.
did you feel that you still got the essence of the figure in that moment?
Yeah, yeah,
That's all
yeah.
that matters. Yeah,
I mean, they look uh, grotesque, but
that's okay. Yeah, but I'll tell you, the more you do them, the more they may look more realistic. And that depends on what your intention is. So if your intention is to exaggerate them, then
oh,
you can keep doing that and you'll even learn how to do that even more and they'll look more interesting and they may look more artistic or whatever rather than just like maybe look just extreme, disturbing, or whatever you want to call it. But if your intention is to capture it more realistically, what you're seeing, and really get the proportions, then you can combine this type of gesture drawing with other ways to approach the figure, whether it's shapes or massing or sighting with your eyes. I mean, there's so many different ways to learn that we could have a whole year-long course on it. So this is just the beginning, and hopefully like you guys will continue on that note. Okay, I see three hands. I'm going to take you quickly, Hillary, and then
I was gonna, you want me to share what I did?
this is up to you.
So I just did it I misunderstood, or I did it like this. So I did all the charcoals and then I went back and did the pencils and then I did the
Yeah, that's correct.
paint. But I didn't do any shading. I was more focused because I've never drawn figures before. So this was my
We really got it for
You got it.
So I did notice, like when I was doing the charcoal, I was doing the torso too long, and then
Yeah,
maybe
you
too
tightened
short.
it up there. Yeah, very nice. So you went too tight a little bit in the middle, and then you kind of got
Yeah.
closer on the third one.
And then with the paint one, I tried to make it flow, but here, I'll just show you this other page. I don't know. Same thing. The torso you can see on the charcoal is too long.
Very nice.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
But
But you got it
yeah,
right on the other two.
I
Those
showed
are
you my
really-
two best. I'm not showing anything
That's
else.
right. That's okay. Those are wonderful. Thank you.
I
Okay.
mean, it was fun, but yeah, it's a lot of I guess, yeah. So the paint is to be more painty then, not like, is that what you're saying?
I mean, I use the tip of my brush to do the drawing, and then I use the belly of the brush to fill in some shading. But
Okay.
you didn't have time for shading. That's okay. You can always go back to them if you want to practice that. You've got the
Okay.
deck. You could.
Okay.
Yeah, Ginny, are you asking another question?
Yeah, one of your links was that Charlie McKessie.
Yeah.
And I read his book and I thought, wow, I wonder who illustrated that. And sure enough, he wrote the book and he illustrated it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shock.
But you notice he'll just use
Mhm.
a curved line and that's it. You know, he doesn't feel the need to draw a whole animal or a whole anything.
No,
Just
but I looked at
bare
that and I said,
minimum.
boy, that looks so familiar. And then I realized, oh, I read that book. It's so good.
Yeah. I'm glad you went to that one. All right, Jerry, you had your hand up. Did we answer your question?
Well, mine all look like robots, and they don't look like people. So I have a lot of work to do.
Message
My
me
char-
after class, okay?
My charcoal ones come out a
We're
little
not
bit
going to
better.
we're not going to be able to see it, Jerry, because your background is blurred.
Oh, is it? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, I'll fix that.
Message me after class
on
or
to
at
the
the
next-
end. At the end, we can
Okay.
share. Yeah.
Okay. All right. How
Right,
do I
keep-
do that?
keep
Let's see
practicing.
more.
If you guys like figures, keep practicing. If you like to include figures in your drawings, keep going.
Mhm.
You'll get better, I promise. Practice is the secret. So, okay. All right. So we're going to talk about composition today. We're going to go over composition basics. I'm going to touch on 8 elements of design, which can come into play in your composition, but they also can come into play in other ways. And so we're just going to relate them to composition a little bit. I'm going to be giving you some further study. So homework for further study this class. If these are things you're interested in. I'm going to touch on basic perspective. Don't anybody run away. It's going to be a pretty simple introduction and a way to accomplish perspective in more of a sighting way as well as the traditional way. And we'll do some buildings. I know for a lot of us, we want to. I'm one of them. Like I was always afraid to put structures or buildings in my drawings because I just didn't know how to make them look right because the shapes were less organic. So I want you guys to feel like you can do that. I want you to feel like you can include things in your drawings. Okay, so what is composition? Composition is arranging your drawing on the page strategically. So rather than just copying what you see in front of you, it's thinking about the visual elements of space, shape, line, and even value within a frame to tell your story in an engaging way, something that isn't confusing, but also and is straightforward, but also engaging. There are ways to lead the viewer's eye through the drawing, both through a focal point and other things that will help make your drawing stronger, and then also will make your painting stronger by association if you're painting. Okay. So the first step for me in composition, which we're not going to spend a lot of time on, is identifying your story. So first thing you want to do is know what you want to say in your drawing. So it might start off as a scribble, or it might start off as an idea, but even as you firm it up, you may be thinking to yourself, what's the star of the show here? What am I trying to say? So identifying that story is important. And we do a lot of that in the watercolor class. A lot of you are in that class. For those of you who aren't in that class, well, I'll just touch on it briefly in a minute, okay? I don't want to like go over and over that. But thinking about what you want to say, I know that in our exercises we've been doing up until now, we haven't really, you haven't had a chance to identify your story because you're just doing what I tell you to do. But when you go to do your own drawings, it is, I think, really helpful to think about what you want to say. Okay, so after you've figured that out, you can arrange your subject on the page strategically, and there are different ways to do this. So we're going to cover that first, and then we'll cover the design elements that can help you strengthen your drawings. Okay. So really quickly about telling a story. Oops. Think about what you want to say with the story. A story, a photograph or a scene in front of you can have a lot of different focal points and things that draw emotion in you and things that you want to say. You should pick one. Really pick one. In a comic strip, you may have a number of different frames. If you think about a movie, you've got hundreds of thousands of frames, but artists usually just have one frame to tell a story. And so that means if we want people to understand what we are trying to draw or paint, that then we have to be clear. We have to help lead them there. We don't want to confuse them, right? So layout is one of the tools that we have for composition. Some of us already know this, right? A landscape is, and we know this either from art or we know it maybe from photography even, but let's talk about the terminology. Landscape is what you see here. It's when your horizontal measurement is proportion is longer than your vertical. And it's called landscape because it's great for landscapes. It is usually what we see when we're looking out at a landscape, unless you're looking through a vertical window or something like that. You see everything spread in front of you, and it's usually longer than it is tall. Portrait is when you flip it 90 degrees. You've got the vertical is taller or longer on that measurement than the horizontal. And also is very common for portraits because if you think of a bust of a person, it's much taller head to, let's say, collarbone than it is wider. Okay. So we say landscape or portrait. Square is very good for having a balanced design where you want something classical. Square can also convey a very contemporary look to your subject because you didn't see a lot of square paintings throughout history. They're kind of on the more modern side. Okay. Because they're the same measurements and same proportions, then what you can very much achieve in them is balance because everything can be sort of centered. Okay. There's also other layouts to consider. So there's more unconventional layouts. Oh, I got a typo here, sorry. You've got circular. You can remember back in the day, portraits were often done in circles or ovals. They're not as popular now. They're seen as more unconventional now. But there are options and they may work for your subject to frame it in an interesting way. Actually, circular and oval have kind of come back recently. You could have a floating, or like a silhouette, which means you don't necessarily have a hard frame. The subject is sort of just floating there. And then you could also have a collage where things are layered. So you have a lot of different options when you're thinking about, think in your mind of something you might have been thinking about drawing. The first thing to think about is your story, and the next thing may be to think about is the layout. So what size piece of paper will you use, or how will you tape off your paper or measure off your frame? Even before you start drawing, you might think about this. So here's some examples of where you have an unconventional sort of silhouette of this man up here. That was a drawing I did in high school. And then a typical conventional landscape, horizontal layout, and then a circle. So you can even buy watercolor paper, by the way, in round blocks. If you guys haven't seen it, it's so helpful. You don't have to measure off a circle. Okay. Let's touch on if your composition is going to be open or closed. Some of you know what this means. In a closed composition, you have all of the elements fully within the frame. Okay? It's stable, self-contained, and you kind of, everything there is to see, you see it. The one on the right here with this pelican, this is a closed composition. Think of like closed-minded. All the decisions are already there for you. You don't have to use your imagination too much about what's happening because you can see everything. So everything that I can see is pictured. So sometimes that can be quite static or unimaginative. In an open composition, elements may be partially out of frame. An open composition, you can kind of think open to interpretation. It suggests that there's some sort of bigger story, perhaps. And sometimes it feels more intimate, an open composition, but it also can draw more questions, you know? So where is this pelican in space? Okay. With either an open or closed, yeah, question?
Why isn't the pelican an open composition since its back end isn't in there?
Well, because I would consider it is open, this guy, but I would consider the star or the subject of this pelican to be the actual gullet because it looks like a fishing net that he's caught a fish in. And so even though part of his body is slid off the frame, the main subject is really quite within frame. And it's open because
Okay.
and in an open composition, elements are usually partially out of frame. So think of a picture. Think of a picture where you've seen it. We've all seen it, where it's like this much of the face, right? So interesting. This is open. This would be closed. Okay, so usually in an open composition, part of your subject matter is falling off the page, but the main subject should never fall off the page. So even though
So what's your story?
yeah, the story
That's where you're doing your story.
that's where knowing your story is important. Thank you, Vicki. So if your story here was about the pelican's wings and tail, then you're not telling the story very well here, are you? But if the story is about this pelican that's just caught a fish in its own natural web, which is the gullet, then you're capturing that story very well, and the back half of the bird is unimportant. Yeah, good point. All right, so this is the part that I think is really important. There's different, like we'll often see a picture in front of us or have something on our phone, and maybe we've thought a little bit about centering the main subject within the frame. Centering, we try to capture it so that the subject is centered, but centered isn't the only arrangement. And in fact, sometimes it's the least compelling arrangement. So and sometimes it's not possible because maybe you have two very important elements that you want to capture to tell your story. So what if you have a mother and child playing on the sand, but they're not right next to each other? So they're not, you're not able to put them together. So there's different ways we can compose our arrangement. No matter what we see in front of us, we can alter things. So I'm going to give you guys some examples. I will send out a packet, so you don't need to write these down. I want to just share them with you, and then I'll show you some examples. So the rule of thirds is one most people know. It's also called tic-tac-toe board, and it's when you have an intersection of lines that divide your paper into equal thirds. So let me show you that right now. So this is a photograph, not a painting. But what you have is two vertical lines dropped, two horizontal lines drawn across. You've got fairly equal tic-tac-toe board here. And science, I guess, tells us that this is a very interesting composition. If you put the horizon or tabletop or wherever the eye line is, if you put it across either the bottom third or the upper third, not right in the middle. So you want to try to land your important compositional elements at the intersection of these lines or somewhere near them. They don't have to be right on them, but look how the elephant's trunk is right on that vertical third, and also how his head is right here. So if your story is about the tree is very large, the elephant is also big, but he's reaching up to eat from this acacia or whatever kind of tree it is, baobab or acacia tree, then the trunk is an important element, right? He's reaching up there. And so that leads your eye up to the tree. If you had put the elephant in the center, it might not be as interesting. So this is the rule of thirds. And this is the one most people employ on a regular basis because it is quite easy to figure out. There's another really common compositional rule called the golden mean, which was developed in, I think, in the Renaissance. And it places your main subject off center with all of the other elements leading to it. I don't know if I have a drawing of it. Oh, I do. I'll share it with you right now. Give me one quick sec. So it's also called the golden ratio, and it's a little complicated. So we're not going to go into the math of it, but what you'll see is this was employed by a lot of the Renaissance painters, where the main subject is here. It could be like this or like this even. And then other elements will take the viewer's eye on a journey to go inside. It's almost like Fibonacci spirals. Okay, that one's a little more difficult, but if that's something that interests you, there are a lot of artists who've kind of gone real deep on that. I'm looking at the chat. Thanks, Sarah. All right. So golden ratio, if it's something that you're very, or golden mean, that's something that I can suggest some further exploration into. A really common compositional structure is balance scales, which is also called a classical composition. So it's when you want to have a harmonious and balanced picture, it works really well in a square frame, but it can also work in other frames. And balance scales is just what like it sounds like. You have one element on one side, another element on the other side, and they kind of balance each other out. So actually, I think that my logo follows the balance scales pretty well. The triangle formula also, by the way, can be very harmonious and balanced. I'll show you that in a minute. Okay. So this is also balance scales. You've got two sort of similar triangular shapes here. They're very similar. What you have in the foreground is a different story with some interesting diagonals that are leading your eye to those mountains. So you can employ more than one technique or tool at the same time within the same picture. Other compositional techniques are to snake or S-curve your composition. So you can see that here in the neck of this bird. You create a lot of movement and depth. It's also used a lot in landscapes where you have like a stream or a weaving path or something like that going through it. And when you're thinking about these compositions, I think what's important, especially if these concepts are new to you, is you're not choosing a composition and then trying to fit your subject into it. You look at your subject matter and then you say, what can I employ with this to make it kind of more interesting? And so if you were painting this bird's neck, you may exaggerate the S-curve, for example, or maybe reduce other elements in it to make the S-curve more visible, right? So you're not trying to fit your subject into a box. You're trying to employ some of these sort of tried and true tools to make things seem balanced or kinetic. Okay. Another composition that's common is circular. So when you have the subject right in the center, and it's often is either a light subject surrounded by darks or the opposite, then we can, oops, somebody's talking there. Consider it a circular composition, and that you would want to simplify everything else around it. Let me see if I have a picture of that. And then diagonals are really interesting, is where you place your subjects along strong slanting lines. So here in this picture, you've got the top of it is employing the balanced sort of composition. And then here you have a lot of strong diagonals that will lead you into the picture. My story here is the Owens River Valley. That's my story. Here's another one with diagonals. Go down here. So if you look at this, the vanishing point is somewhere back here. So some of the stream is hidden, but you do see the Ochre Bank, and it's taking you on a journey. This diagonal that's pointing southeast, then this one is pointing southwest, southeast, southwest again, right? So it's leading the eye in, and it's very engaging and dynamic, even though it's just a landscape. It doesn't even really look like the water is moving that much, but yet it's not a static composition. A couple of other things you can use are cross formulas. So when you have a very strong vertical, especially a narrow one, and you dissect it or bisect it with a strong horizontal, like in these birds, you've got a cross formula. This is even almost maybe an L shape, which is another compositional technique. It can be quite strong. There's also Steelyard. Steelyard is most landscape painters' favorite. Steelyard is when you have a large element, and then on the other side of your painting, you have a second similar but smaller element. So I'm showing you my dolphin painting here. If you flip it, you can kind of see the Steelyard a little bit better. So you've got the bigger dolphin, and then the shape is echoed by the smaller dolphin. That would be considered a Steelyard composition. It's more interesting than if they both were the same size. Creates a little bit more tension in there with the fact that they're different sizes. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay. And then you also have radiating lines. So if you have like a sunset, for example, or something dynamic like that, then using radiating lines from a vanishing point is a really dynamic way to draw the viewer's eye to whatever your main subject matter is. It also is really useful when you have a strong perspective, like with landscapes or cityscapes. Okay, here's a couple more things to think about. Triangle formula we talked about is when you have a triangle as your main shape, and it gives you a feeling of balance. So here's where I have a negative triangle shape. It's not a perfect triangle, but it's an approximation of a triangle in the negative shape between the two dogs. And then here's where you have a positive triangle with this cornucopia as forming a rough triangle as well. So if you got rid of the brown part of the cornucopia, it would be more of a circular composition. We talked about the L shape. Here's an L shape composition when you have a very strong vertical, and then you have either another vertical or a horizontal on one side of it. That can give you an L. You can flip the L, obviously, in all four directions. And then I don't know if this is a compositional technique. I guess it is, but I utilize this quite a lot. It's called framing. It's when you use some of your compositional elements to frame your main subject. So here you can see where the two trees I've drawn, both with the trunk and then also somewhat with the leaves up on the top, the canopy, are framing the main subject here, which is the building. And so these trees are out of frame, but the whole building is in frame. Open composition, you guys. So you may be asking yourself, I've not done this before. I've only ever touched on maybe one or two of these. How do I use them and how many? So you can use as many of these as make sense in your composition. So like you can use the balanced scales if you have two elements that are very similar. And then you can use the rule of thirds to make sure that the most interesting or compelling parts of the subject fall onto areas where the eye will keep moving around. Okay. That's just one example. You can layer a lot of different things. So by layering the rules, they sort of just strengthen your composition and help you tell your story better. Any questions on those? I know that's a lot of information, but now when you are drawing or when you are looking at other people's artwork, I want you to think, I want to challenge you to think to yourself, has this artist utilized a compositional technique that I can recognize, or maybe more than one? And you'll start seeing them and thinking about, with pictures that you like, what techniques does that artist use? And then that might translate to which ones you want to use. And also when you're doing your own drawings, you may think to yourself, well, I've got one sort of circular element, or I have one tall element. Maybe I'll offset that element with another element on the side that's a little bit smaller and create more balance. So that's how you can start thinking about these. Okay. Any of you do this already? Do you just draw exactly what's in the photo you feel like drawing? Just draw it straight from the photo and don't change anything? Okay. So you're the artist, and that means you're also the architect, and you get to change the drawing and make it more interesting. And I know some of you guys have taken the other class with me before, but some of you haven't. So you guys can start thinking about it. Not only can you leave things out or add things to make your composition more interesting, but when you leave things out or when you add things back in, you can think about how to utilize those things to make them more interesting. So let's say you wanted to add birds into your composition to have a sign of life in your landscape. Rather than just putting the bird smack in the middle of the sky, you may think to yourself, I need an element to balance out a strong element I have here. So I'm going to put the birds over here, and I'm going to create more of a balance, but attention through steelyard, let's say. So you may not make as big a shape of birds up here as you do down here, but you put them in a strategic place rather than here or anywhere else. So you'll start thinking about these things when you're drawing. And again, the more you study other people's drawings, when I send you to these artists, you can be thinking about not just their technique, quality of line, how they do their shading, but also thinking about their compositions. We see compositions all around us in daily life. For example, even on this bottle of wine, someone has thought through the composition here. And they have radiating lines, and then they have, I would call this just maybe a steelyard. You've got a big shape and a smaller shape. Steelyard, I don't know what it comes from. That's a good question. I don't know, Diane. I'll look that up. I'll figure that out. Or if anyone knows, they can put it in the chat. Okay. So a little bit more on this. Some really simple things to think about are avoid placing your main subject dead center because it can create a static composition. You may have something where you want to convey a lot of static. If you want that, then you break that rule. But as a general rule, we avoid placing our main subject dead center. It's static. It gives your eye nowhere to travel. But at the same time, it's really important to avoid letting your main subject fall out of the frame. Even to have lesser subjects fall out of the frame are not always a great idea because it can make your eye go to the sides of the page, which is generally something we don't want. Okay. We also try to avoid equal spacing of objects. I'll show you an example of a little drawing I was doing the other day. Let's see. Equal spacing of objects can give you repetition, but it gives you repetition without variety. I'm going to find this in a minute, I swear. So it can also create just a little bit of a boring picture. So here's an example. So here the objects are fairly equally spaced. And the only way to create variety with them is to sort of change up other aspects of it, right? So if you have like different branches, it can get less boring. But let's say all of the trees here were like this, straight across, and you had 4 of them and they were equally spaced. That can be really a tough sell on a picture. A better way of maybe accomplishing that. So I would call that a don't, or I could draw a don't and then a do. Let me show you. And this is like a real easy one to learn. Here we go. So if you want to draw a row of trees, rather than drawing your trees all the same width and all equally spaced. So this would be the don't. This would be more of a do, is space them out a bit. And even better, maybe overlap them if you can. So already you have a little bit more interest going on. And then if you can change up the thicknesses of the trees, even better. And then add variety in other ways. Maybe one of them is a different color than the others. Okay. So repetition can be very nice in creating unity in your drawing, but you have to have variety within that repetition. Does that ring a bell for anyone? Anyone ever copied something and then been like, why is this so boring? I should have changed it up a little. So now you might be thinking of some of these things a little bit more explicitly. Okay, so I have some do's also. Do overlap your objects. Overlapping objects creates visual interest and depth of field. Also, something to think about when you're trying to avoid equal spacing and add variety is think about doing things in odd numbers. So rather than having 2 trees in your picture and one is on one side of the house and the other is on the other side of the house, maybe add a second tree on one side. So you have 3 trees, one on one side, 2 on the other. It's just usually more interesting. Same thing with the number of lines that you use. So I don't, recommend that you're always counting things all the time, but maybe when you're examining your composition, you can be thinking to yourself, if you see something that just seems a little too static, you could be thinking to yourself, what if I added another tree? Or what if I added another XYZ? Another bird in the sky or whatever, will it make it more interesting? I know I'm using landscapes, but this could apply to really anything. And then what we just talked about is to try to create variety even when you have a rhythm and pattern. So you can create variety through your spacing, through changing the shapes up a little bit, through changing the way you shade, even through changing your quality of line, and it will give you more dynamic painting or drawings. Okay. So let's talk about some of the topics that we have all. Oh, Sarah, yes?
I just wanted to know, talking about shading, what pencil were you just using when you showed us the example?
So this is a pencil from Michaels, and it's just called a sketching pencil. It's an 8B, so it's the softest one that I had recommended that you go by, but it's like a very fat pencil.
Well, it worked really well on your demo. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I like this pencil for doing value drawings and just getting basic ideas down on the paper because it's hard to get really finicky with a fat pencil like this. So it kind of is my big picture pencil. All right, so shape and line and shading, 3 things we've been talking a lot about, how you can think about them further in your drawing. So let's talk about line first. So you could utilize lines in your drawing strategically. So we've been talking about using line as contour mainly, and also line when you're doing cross-hatching and shading. But lines in terms of composition can direct the viewer's eye to move around the picture, and they can also add to a different feeling or mood in your picture. So horizontal lines generally give the feeling of peace and calm and stability. The one caveat I have is with horizon lines, which are important if you are a landscape or cityscape or seascape painter, keep those lines level. So once your horizon is at the wrong angle, even if it's only slightly, you're going to lose your credibility with the viewer very quickly. Okay, so make sure your horizon is real level. Often it's the first thing we put into a picture. So, use a ruler or a straight edge and make sure you really measure that. So that's my one caveat there. Verticals, on the other hand, give you a sense of stability. They also give you a variety. So they're varying from the direction of the horizontals, and they also can imply or give you more scale. So by adding some verticals in here, there's a lot of horizontals, both in the clouds, in the horizon, which, by the way, is crooked. I see it right now. They also, some of the shading is horizontal. So these verticals give you some variety and break up that staticness. And they also can make you feel that things are very tall, especially if you let that vertical go off the page. So use them in combination. Diagonals give you energy and motion, and they can also create the contour of the landscape, as they do here with this little tiny value sketch I did of some fields that I had painted once. So you could see that these diagonals keep leading the viewer, lead your eye into the picture, and a little bit kind of land right here on this, which was a house. I also did the house in a different color, which really made it the focal point, but my story was this little vineyard. It was a vineyard. And so use those diagonals to create energy and motion. So even again here, you could see we've got some diagonals here in the landscape, adding again to variety, but also a little bit more energy in the picture. Okay. Also know that when you have converging lines, they draw the eye. So all of these lines are converging towards a vanishing point, even though they're really varied. The lines are being used strategically, and they give you a sense of depth. So they draw your eye in the painting, and they give a sense of depth. Okay, so we can use line in so many different ways in our drawings. We can also use shapes. So using shapes in composition not only help you create the form, but you can use them strategically to create visual interest and balance in your picture. So I use shapes really strategically because I really am more of a shape person than a line person. I love drawing with shape, and I love thinking about how to make my shapes echo in my picture. So one of the things I do with shapes is I try to remember not to make the shapes all the same size. So I think of shapes in terms of the daddy, mama, baby formula. And I forget who I first learned this time. I've seen it so many times. So I think it might be from Mitchell Alcala, I think is his name. I'll put it in the homework email. But it's funny too, because the daddy shape means you should just have one big shape in your picture. In this case, it's the arch. And then the mama shape, you should have like one or two smaller shapes. And then the baby shapes, you should have maybe 5 or 7 or 9 of those. So we're thinking mostly in odd numbers. And then thinking about where to put them to balance things out. So can you guys see a repetition of shape in this drawing? By the way, could just shout it out.
The rocks are the mama shapes.
Yeah,
The big
the rocks.
up front.
Yeah, the rocks are the mama shapes. I didn't follow this exactly, this formula, but sometimes, you can kind of take it with a grain of salt. But I do have a repeating shape in here, and it's this curved shape, right? It's kind of rounded on the top and flat on the bottom. I've kind of echoed it throughout the whole picture. Even the grasses that are here in the yellow and purple, they still have rounded tops and flat bottoms. Even the hills in the background have, and Minnie, you know where this is, right? This is up in the Alabama hills. You've got rounded with flat bottoms. So I'm echoing this same shape all the way throughout the picture. I'm just varying how I do it. I'm varying the size and also varying the color and some of the shading as well. Okay. But it makes it a little bit more harmonious because of that repetition of shape. Does that make sense? Yeah. I think it's funny that that whoever first thought of this though thought the mama there should be two of them. One or two of them. Okay. So I always remember that. Again, let's talk about overlapping shapes again. Every shape in this picture overlaps another shape. So instead of the boat being over here, the boat is in front of other boats, which is in front of the casino, which is in front of this hill, which is in front of this hill, this mountain, and so forth. So those layers not only can help you create depth, but are just more interesting. I think the more overlapping you can have in a picture, the better. So you could kind of see here with these cow sketches. So these were studies for a painting. You've got not bad where you have a little bit of an overlap on the horizon, but they're not overlapping each other, these cows, and they're not overlapping the mountain. In the better version, there's a little bit more overlap of the shapes, especially over here in this clump of cows on the right, but they're not really overlapping this horizon. It's kind of annoying that they're not overlapping it. Like your eye automatically kind of goes there and stops. I call it a hard stop when something like that happens. Even though this guy on the left is overlapping. But if you look at the best version on the left here, you've got overlapping shapes on both sides, even though this one didn't turn out well on the left. I would refine that. This is just a sketch that I did. And then in the background, I've got even more shapes that are overlapping that mountain now. And they're also changing in scale. So you're getting the effect of distance as well, because those little ones are, I recognizes that those must be far away. They're not just floating miniature cows, you know, our brains know this. So that's some ways you can think about shape in your compositions. We also have been working a lot with value and shading. And we've been talking about ways to, you know, make it feel like there's a 3D sense or even having a cast shadow. But you can also shade in your composition just through like, it's called local value, which is the relative lightness or darkness of each of the shapes or aspects, objects in your drawing. So value and shading will ground your object and create visual interest, but it also can tell your viewer where to look in the picture. So you can use values strategically. You don't always have to use them exactly like you see when you are looking at your subject. So I'll show you two examples. So first, I like to remind everybody that wherever your dark light contrast is should be your focal point. Wherever you have the greatest dark light contrast, usually that means white on black or white, almost white on very dark, right? So you may not use whites or blacks in your picture, but this is where your focal point should be. The other thing I want you guys to consider is not depicting shading or mass everywhere, but only in your center of interest. So I'll show you two examples of that. Here, I decided not to shade any of the figure. I didn't want to shade her at all because her contours are already very descriptive of her shape. So what I instead decided to do was to draw attention to those contours in her flesh by only coloring in her top, her bottom, and her hair. And that way she didn't feel like a negative to me, like a negative of a photo negative, I mean. But I didn't add any shading to her body. And I think that that starkness adds to the visual interest. I don't think it needed shading on the body here to give the feeling that her muscles are and flesh are three-dimensional. I think it's already there. So that was a choice. If you also look at the right, forget about the yellow. The yellow does pop out, obviously pops out as a silhouette or halo. But if you look at where the shading is, I really only did strong shading in the eyes, nose, and mouth. The other shading is quite much lighter. And the highest contrast of dark and light is in the part I want you to look at. Do you see where that is? Anybody want to Venture,
Eyes and
the eyes, right? By creating that highlight in the eye against the dark eye. Whether or not this cat has eyes that dark doesn't matter. He doesn't. He actually has quite light eyes, but I wanted you to look there. This is my friend's cat where I'm staying, by the way. His name is Carmine. He's like a mafia boss. He weighs 28 pounds, but he's a gentle giant. And I just wanted you to see the emotion in his eyes. So that's where I wanted everybody to look. So you can use shading strategically. You don't always have to shade where you think you would. So you don't always need to be thinking about creating three-dimensionality, especially. I want you guys to think about that. Instead, you could use it in a graphic design manner. I'll just use this again. So here there's some shading that's used creatively to create a shadow at the top of the woman's head and under her neck. But obviously, if she were more realistically drawn, she would have shading here and on the side of her nose and on the bottom of her lip and all of those places. But here, obviously, the artist wanted you to focus in on here. And so that's where the shading happens. And the other color that's used, or consider that a value addition, is in the red lips and the nail. This name of this bottle of wine, by the way, is called Hearsay, which I think this tells the story in a really cute way. Hearsay. I don't know what it has to do with wine, but maybe it means don't believe everything you hear when you are drinking wine. So different ways to use shape, line, and value strategically, not just to create realism, okay? You may use it to create realism and also use it strategically, or you may use it strategically and decide realism is less important to you and you're not going to use it for that. Does anyone have any questions about that? I should stop for a minute.
I think all this information, I've never had a drawing class, never had a clue what I was doing or what I was looking at. It's a lot of information. And I don't know.
You don't know how to synthesize it yet.
Right. I'm kind of overwhelmed.
Yeah, that's okay. That's a lot of information. Yeah. So for me, anytime I take a class, I think if I can get 20% out of it on the first try, that's good. If I can take away 20%. And I think that that's kind of a common goal. It's like I've heard it from other people. Like, because especially when you're brand new, there's no way your brain can take it all in. But if you go back and watch the recordings and you do the further study, I find that over time, especially when I repeat things, then I get another 20% and another 20% and another 20%. And before then, I have much of a greater understanding that repetition is really important, because not only is it a lot of information, I'm telling it to you in the context of the way that maybe I draw or I paint. And so you may have to figure out, how does it fit into your practice? So first you need to hear it and understand it. The next thing you need to do is practice it. But the third thing really is, how do I practice it and incorporate it, not the way that Anne does it, but the way that I like to do it? How will I utilize it? And so, yeah, it takes a lot of time to synthesize. So I think it's normal, Minnie. Yeah.
Okay.
I always feel that way when I take a new class, and I learn a lot. If I don't learn a lot, then I'm not feeling that way. And I think that that's also a good tell that maybe that class wasn't a great class. If I come out of that going, I don't feel overwhelmed at all. That was way too, it was too little, you know? So I just want to touch on the 8 principles of design. I have more on this in a recorded video that I did for landscapes, composition for landscapes. Some of you guys have taken that, but most of you guys haven't. There's a 27-minute clip. So I will share that with you in the homework, where we talk about the principles of design. And it really is quite interesting, of different tools that an artist or a designer, if you think of it in terms of graphic design, can utilize in order to create more interesting or stronger compositions. So we talked about shapes and we talked about repeating shapes. Repetition is one of the biggest ones in composition, I think. And by the way, you can look at these principles of design through the lens of color, through the lens of value, through the lens of composition. So we're looking at it through the lens of composition. So repeating shapes are really helpful in creating unity in your picture. So do you guys, anyone want to, should I call on someone or does anyone want to volunteer? Do you see shapes repeating in this picture? They may not be as obvious as in the last example.
Yes.
Diane, what do you see? What are the
well,
shapes that you see?
I see the shape of her dress is a mound, and there's the trees are mound and they go back into the distance. But even the rump of the goat is a mound.
Yeah, those rounded shapes. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. I could have made tall trees. I could have made like cypress trees, but then I wouldn't have had that repetition. I think it would have drawn away from the subject. So by using repeating shapes, they can subtly create harmony in your drawing. Here's another repeating detail. So another example of repetition, but not with shape, but with line. So I don't think I need to call on you guys. I think you all see it. The verticals, the strong verticals that are used are also diagonal lines, but those lines are like highlighted. And then even in the umbrella, I created some strong lines. That could have been a solid umbrella, but I felt like we needed some balance and unity over there. So I changed the direction. I varied the repetition, so creating variation within that repetition is important, but they're mostly sort of very similar vertical lines that unify this kind of chaotic composition. Something to think about. And then don't forget scale. So you can repeat the same shape and change the scale. So not only does it create variety by having this maybe family of cows over here and give you, rather than have 3 or 4 cows all the same size facing in the same direction, et cetera, you can vary up a lot of different things. You can overlap them, and changing the size gives you more visual interest, but also putting some smaller ones in the background automatically gives you that sense of distance and depth of field, which again, remember, we're drawing on a 2-dimensional piece of paper. Anything we can do to create depth of field is very helpful. Okay, so if you guys are interested in these design perspectives, then I have another video I'll link you to in the homework. Okay, so I just want to stop for a few minutes. Any other thoughts on composition?
Oh,
Okay, I'll challenge you guys in your next drawing or painting that you do on your own. So not one that you do for this class, but let's say you're doing the drawing with me for this week's happy hour. I want you to think about some of these things we discussed today and how they might come into play in improving a drawing. So I don't always send out a photo that's like perfectly composed. A lot of the time, and I know that because I see a lot of you, like Ginny, you do this all the time. Minnie, you do it too. You guys will change it up. Vicky, I think you do it too. You guys will change up the drawing. You'll, like Ginny, you like to do multiples. So you'll put in like, if the subject was like an elephant, you'll do 3 elephants, in the same drawing. And so you guys, some of you are already thinking about it. I want to challenge you to think about some of the other concepts that we've discussed and how you may be able to utilize them in your drawings. And when I say make a better drawing, I don't mean for me, I mean for you, right? You want to make something that's more interesting, or maybe you even want to challenge yourself to make a more like difficult drawing. So these are some tools to help you with that. Okay. All right. So let's talk about perspective. We're going to draw in a minute. That was a lot of theory. Okay. So we're going to talk about perspective. So what is perspective? Perspective is just an illusion. It's one tool that you can use to create depth in your drawing. We already just talked about different ways you can create depth in a drawing without any perspective at all. For example, changing the scale can create depth. So perspective is another way to create depth. If perspective scares you, you do not need to even utilize it. You don't have to. But some of you guys are interested in it, and so I want to touch on it. So when we talk about linear perspective, we talk about using radiating lines that converge in either 1 or 2 or even 3 points that are called the vanishing points, and they're on the eye line. So if you look at this picture, there is one vanishing point right here. All of these lines converge to this point, and this point is on the horizon or eye line. Horizon is just the line that you see when you're standing up. It's eye level, and it usually in a landscape denotes where the land stops and the sky meets. Okay. So sometimes it's not so easy to see it, and you have to imagine it or make it up in your drawing. But in any case, this vanishing point sits on the horizon, all the lines meet it, and then all of your objects kind of conform to it. And so objects that are closer to you are bigger, and they reduce along the line of this diagonal. These diagonals are called orthogonals. That's what these radiating lines are called. So not only is this tree smaller, it's the right amount of smaller because it starts at the horizon or the land and it stops at the top of this orthogonal. Okay? So that's what makes it convincing that these are going back into space, and that the sizes and the angles kind of make sense to our eyes. Okay? So that's all that linear perspective is. You start with a horizon, you find a vanishing point, and then you would draw these diagonals, and everything is going to follow them. So I'll show you very simply. You, by the way, typically use this for a simple landscape, or maybe a scene where you have like an interior or a street where the walls of the buildings face you head on. So it is the simplest kind of perspective. All of your front-facing surfaces, like a wall or a building, are drawn parallel to the edges of the paper. So here's your front-facing edge. If you imagine this as, say, a brick or a building, whatever you want to imagine this shape is. And then the side of that building, the lines of it converge onto your vanishing point. And you already saw what the radiating lines look like if we stretch them out in all directions. Very simply here, you can see how you would just erase all the lines around it, and you're left with really only needing these 2 lines for a simple 1-point perspective. Okay. Here's a landscape with a single 1-point perspective. So you put a horizon down. You can kind of still see it there. I didn't erase it. And then you find a vanishing point. A vanishing point is where, if you're looking at a line, or especially if there's like a street or a row of buildings or even a stream or a path, if you look out into the distance, at a certain point, it's so small, it vanishes. That's why it's called the vanishing point. So you can find a vanishing point in a scene just by looking for where the lines seem to converge. They're converging right here. And so I've drawn all of my orthogonals in, and then the edges of the stream bank, even this ochre grass or whatever you would want to call it along the edges of the stream is all kind of like getting bigger or receding along these lines. Okay, it's a very straightforward way to create depth in your painting. This is a single point perspective in a cityscape. So you draw a horizon, you drop in where it recedes. So in this case, it's as far as you can see back. At a certain point, there'll either be a building there, or there may be cars or something, and you can't see it anymore. That's the vanishing point. And then your streets and the tops of the buildings and even the clouds to a degree will follow along the lines of these orthogonals. And so the tops of the buildings are usually what we get wrong when we're trying to draw this without our radiating lines, right? Without that pinwheel, we may put the top of that building at the wrong angle, and that'll all of a sudden throw us off, right? Has everybody been there?
Yes.
Okay. So that's all single point perspective is. I have a video that I will include in the homework where you guys can follow along with me and you can practice doing 1 point and 2 point perspective. I just want to show them to you here because this is like a whole class in and of itself, to be honest. And a lot of people don't use this a lot of the time. So I hardly ever use 2 point perspective because I don't draw a lot of buildings. I draw, and when I do draw buildings, I just draw them the way I see them. I don't necessarily use orthogonals. But if you have a complicated scene or you have, let's say you go on a trip and you're in Venice and you want to capture those buildings quite accurately, then 2 point perspective can be super helpful. So in the same way as with 1 point perspective, you draw a horizon line, then you drop 2 vanishing points. One may be off the page. They may both be off the page. It depends how far away you are from your subject or how close you are from your subject. And then once you've drawn those, then you can start drawing in your buildings. So I'll show you here. With single point, remember the building, the front of the building or the front of the object was flat towards us. In 2 point perspective, it's the corner of the building that's facing you. So if you are standing on a street corner and you want to draw that street and everything in front of you, the buildings are flat or fairly flat facing you, then you're going to utilize 1 point perspective. But if you notice that the corners of all the buildings are facing you, then you're going to utilize 2 point perspective. And rather than just drawing one vanishing point and drawing the pinwheel coming from it, you can draw 2 and draw all the pinwheels coming from it. And then you just drop in your vertical lines and then you like connect the dots. It's like not that hard. It just takes a little bit of practice. These are very simple examples, right? Show you how I use them because I rarely use 2 point perspective. Here's a really simple 2 point perspective that I use just for doing the corner of this sculpture base. So the corner was facing me. So I drew the radiating lines going out this way and this way, this way and this way, and I got the angles. And then I just filled in the verticals, dropped them down. I don't really do a lot of 2 point perspective because I don't do a lot of city scenes. Here's another one where I have the corner of the bridge. So I drew my orthogonals to a degree to get the angle at which all of these lines would be going from the corners. And by the way, the vanishing points are way off the picture. They're not on the picture. They're outside of it. And then the same with just getting the angles right on the edges of this. What is this called again? Lighthouse. I want the slant of the roof to be sort of right. I want the slant of the top of the building to be right. It also can help you with the slant of windows and doors. So 2 point perspective is not something I use a lot, but I do know how to use it if I want to. So I went to England and I went to Oxford, amongst other places. And there were a lot of really beautiful buildings, churches, and so forth. And I've drawn them in the past. And so drawing it, you look how many lines there are. You can have to create a lot of lines, but all you have to do is create those lines. And then all of your roofs and doors and windows, they all go on that line. And so it's like a connect the dots, sort of like with the people. I think I have another one in here that has a lot of lines, but let me see. Sorry, I'm showing you my workbook. Oh, here's one. So many lines, but once you've drawn all your lines in, everything else is just about dropping in the vertical at the right height and then connecting the dots on the orthogonals. So you guys see how that works?
Yep.
Okay. So we're not going to practice that here, but I'm going to send you guys to my other workshop where we practice them in depth. And if you're interested, go for it. If you're not interested, I want to show you another way to do it, okay? You don't have to use perspective at all to draw things in perspective. So I want to show you another way. Oh, by the way, people do ask me about 3-point perspective. You draw the third point when you have like really tall buildings. So for example, if you're looking up, or in this case, this artist has, interestingly enough, drawn this building looking down at it as if they were up in a blimp or something. But generally where you're using 3-point perspective is when the buildings are super tall. And in that case, you're not dropping down a vertical. All of your verticals become diagonals because all those diagonals are going to connect somewhere up in the sky at the third vanishing point. Okay. It's very rare that we utilize this. Usually we can just, use our sighting methods to get those angles right. So I'm going to show you a way to just forget linear perspective and study angles. So it's optional to draw all those orthogonals. You can also depict the illusion of depth just by sighting and using the angle measure that we've done before. So here's an example where I've used a sighting method to do the angles on all of these tents. Are they perfect? Probably not. Are they good enough? They were good enough for me. I still get the feeling of the illusion here, by the way, with the grids going in and out, the way the grids are connected, and the fact that these are in a row and they were getting like slightly smaller as they went back. And that's all I needed. I didn't want to draw all those lines. So we have been studying angles all along since lesson 1. I find that doing small, quick sketches of objects and buildings will build your muscles in the same way that doing lots of gesture drawings over and over again will build your muscles. So what I like to do myself personally is I like to note where the horizon is. Sometimes I note to myself if I can see very clearly that there's 1, 2, or 3-point perspective going on. Sometimes it's not so clear, and so I just disregard it. And then I just sketch. I just do a contour drawing usually. I don't worry too much about the accuracy. I try to get a snapshot of the structure and a detail or two, like a window or door. So usually for me, I want it to be believable as a structure, but it doesn't have to be perfect. In the same way as when I draw people, I'm not doing an anatomical drawing of a person. I'm just trying to express in the moment the gesture of that person. I feel the same way about buildings. And so I would like to practice that together with you guys. So I've got one for us here. Okay. So this is the first one we're going to use. Do you guys want me to do a demo of how I do it?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I thought that might be helpful based on the last lesson we did. So if you want to follow along rather than watch, you're welcome to. I'm just going to get a blank piece of paper. And look how my sketchbook, is your sketchbook filling up, you guys?
Oh, yeah.
Much. Okay. So I may find my horizon using a ruler. And one of the things you may wish to do, you don't have to, but you may wish to choose a frame. A landscape suits a landscape frame very nicely. If this were a tall building, I might choose to do a portrait layout. So let's do this horizon again. It was crooked. Okay. So you don't have to do that. You don't have to do a frame for all of these. I'm using these thicker pencils so you guys can see them. So usually what I do is I pick an angle that seems to stand out to me. Like I'll pick a strong vertical or a strong horizontal. I like to start with vertical. So I'm going to start with the vertical edge right here of this building. And then I'm going to sight the angle of the roof. That looks about right. Maybe it's a little bit too steep. No, that's about right. Good enough. Then I'll find the next vertical and drop it down. I'm not worrying about the bottom edge yet. Okay. I didn't leave enough room, by the way, for the whole side of the building, so I'll probably go off my frame. Okay, so then the next thing I'm going to do is find another horizontal and then drop that vertical down. So while I'm doing this, I'm definitely looking at the length, or the width, I should say, of each of these elements. So I want the proportion to be close, but I'm not like overly measuring everything. Here's where your sighting will come into play. So if I hadn't measured this angle right here, I probably would not have drawn it that steeply. I have to say, if I went in, I probably would have just gone like this. This angle isn't correct. It's much steeper. This is the angle, okay? And then if I follow that back, here's the edge of this building. So the sighting is really helpful in getting the character of the building, the gesture of the building, because sometimes the angles are not what you think they would be. Okay, now I'm going to start looking at how tall this building is. So I'm going to come back here, and then I'm going to sight this bottom angle. And then I'm going to sight this bottom angle. So I've just done that without drawing any diagonal lines, right? Now I can go back in. I've created my stick figure of the building, and I can also sort of find where the middle of this side is, maybe, and just approximately. And then I can, using contour lines, I can just come up here and start giving the building its character. Different building styles have different character to them. So it's up to you how much character you want to include, how much you want to leave out. I'm not trying to draw every window, that's for sure. I just want to get some of this character in here. And I can't even really see too much, but this looks like a door with a sign over it or something. So you can include as much character as you like or as little. So what I also noticed by drawing that line down is that there are windows. There's 4 windows total, so there's going to be 2 of them on each side. And if I want these windows to sort of fall in the same place, I can figure out where the top and bottom of them are, right? So then I'll just put some windows into place. I know the tops and bottoms should kind of match. And then there's more here too. So these kind of go across. And then we've got some here. Probably the line should go up a little. And then over here, this side of the building isn't as important to me. So I'm just going to sketch like a few windows, and I don't care if I get them all in, it doesn't matter. And then if I wanted to go on to the next building, I could go on to the next building and do the same thing. But because this building is smaller and not my main focus, maybe I don't really want to draw too much of it, and I just sort of want to hint at it. Okay. So this is like how I draw buildings in a sort of a gesture format, I would call it. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So I really didn't find any vanishing points. If I were to go back and put in my vanishing points, I could check to see how well I did, you know? How would you do that? Well, go back to your horizon and draw the line extending out, and then look at these lines. I did pretty well.
We can't see you, Ann.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you.
I'm
All right.
Let's try that again. Okay. So if I were to find my horizon and extend that horizon out, and then I could connect my diagonals here and see how well I did on connecting them. Not bad. I mean, they're all like pretty even. So if I wanted to do more buildings over here, I could continue to utilize these lines, right? But I didn't have to use them. All I used was sighting. Does that make sense, everybody? Yeah. Do you like this method? Do you like this idea? Maybe you don't know yet until we try it.
Right.
By the way, I would normally go in and like erase some of these extra lines that I had here. Once I do this over and over again, I don't, unless it's a real difficult one, like those churches or something, I don't really use them. I just use contour drawing for the most part. And then if there's a tricky angle, I might draw a few faint lines. So let's do one together. Let's do this one.
Are you kidding?
Yeah. Okay.
Can
So
we watch you again? Is
you
it
wanna-
okay if we watch you again?
yes. Yeah.
Okay.
But some of you guys also might want to just do it on your own. Let me take a picture of it. Yeah, I'm happy for you to watch me again. Okay. Get the visualizer out. So here's my picture right here. So I'm going to find the horizon. Do you guys see the horizon? I'm going to put it quite low because this castle is tall. And right off the bat, I want to know that I can get in the height of these buildings. So the horizon is just slightly behind the castle. And most of the castle is at the same, fairly same, like sort of bottom line. It sort of goes back and forth, but I'll worry about that when it comes. So I like to find a strong vertical. So I'll start in the middle right here. I'll start with this vertical because this is what looks like the main building of the castle. So I'm just going to draw that strong main vertical. And I know I need to leave a little room for those crenellations on the top of the fortress walls or whatever you would call it. But I think I've got enough room there. And then I also drop this below the horizon because I can kind of see that the vertical goes below the horizon.
And can you put the picture in the visualizer? I can't see the castle.
Yeah.
Like, just move your phone a little. I don't.
Yeah, just
know if
yeah,
that's
just
possible.
move your phone down a little.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great.
I think I could do it even better. Yeah. Okay. And maybe make it straight. How's that?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
good.
that'll
that's
really work
perfect.
well.
That's-
Thanks.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's great, Anne.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, I can't see it though now because there's a glare on it.
Oh.
There we go. Now I can see it. Okay. Bear with me because mine might not be as good as yours. Okay, so then I do see, then I want to capture this horizontal, but it's actually slightly curved because these castle walls are like cylinders, right? So again, I'm not worrying too much about the bottom. I'm going to do the bottom afterwards. And then I'm just going to find the top. So like a contour drawing, or you could even use shapes. If you want to, you can create these little contours now, or you could do them later. I usually do them later. And then I see there's another vertical right here. I'm probably not going to be able to get this whole thing in because I started off a little bit too big, maybe. So I think that these two towers are actually the same size. It's just that we're seeing them more of the one on the right because of the angle at which we're looking. So I think we're getting a little bit more of like a 3D view of it from here. Okay. And then here, I think I see another vertical here. So I'm just kind of drawing this general shape here. And then, oops, I forgot to connect this. There's a shape here too. Okay. So now I've got the main towers of this castle. Then it looks like it sort of drops down to this height. And then I can put in another strong vertical. So this one is actually a little taller. And then I'll try to create that roundness here, just slightly taller, not much. Okay, I'm not going to get the back of that one in, but I'll come over here now. So I'm going to cite, and I think that these are approximately on the same level. They are. So I'm going to draw that. This looks like to me, I'm just going to pull, maybe that's where the entrance is, like the gate to the castle maybe is here. Kind of hard to see what's going on with it, but I kind of like that about it. Okay. And then I can draw this castle. I'm building in another vertical. And then I can see it's like the same height, and then the rest of it is a bit lower. And then I want to try to get in that last vertical. It kind of bumps out a little bit. And that's my castle. So now I just have to look at the bottom. So I'm going to look at the bottom, and what I see is because this castle is on like different planes, this looks like it bumps in and out, and then in a little bit more. You can exaggerate this as much as you want. I feel like this comes out, this goes in, this is straight. I don't think I made this wide enough now that I look at it, but that's okay. I could always make it wider later. I mean, if I did it again, I'm not going to bother erasing it now. And then I have the general sense of things. I might want to add in, here's this doorway. So here's where the details come into play. Oops. So you want to get the character in now that you have the main shape of it. And so through the character is where you could contour and find all the little edges here. And also maybe add a window or two for details. You guys might be seeing more than I'm seeing. I honestly like don't even have my glasses on. Maybe I shouldn't admit that. Maybe I shouldn't admit that. But that's okay, because I'm just looking at big shapes, but sometimes it does help to know what you're looking at. Okay. And then maybe you want to get in a hint of all these little things that are happening here. I'm going to give you guys some homework for drawing buildings, and you'll have the chance to kind of practice this quite a bit. So I could be really exact with these, or I could just sort of draw some in. If I'm out in the countryside, like with my family or something, they don't wait for me. So I have to move quickly on things. Looks like where Rapunzel would be up here. And then I do sort of like this step to look here. So you might want to draw some of these in as details, right? I do kind of like how that looks. And then it looks like there's some kind of crest up here. So that's kind of fun. Sorry, guys. And then over here, I'll just draw again the tops of the, I know there's probably a name for these things. Okay. So I feel like, you know, all the rest of it is just any details you want to add. So there's like a little fence over here. Here's some background, so you have a sense of where it is in time and space, right? There's some background hills back here, some on the other side as well. I don't really like this angle that I drew here, so I'm going to flatten it out. And then the rest of it is just, there's a moat here if you want to draw it. I don't, though. And then you can decide if you want to put, I guess, some either shading or detail into it. I find it's interesting enough. In fact, for me, I would probably, I like the thing I like about it the most is the shape, not so much the walls or anything. So if I were going to do something to this, since I'm demoing, I probably would just highlight the like crenellations here in the top of the castle walls. If I ever do a class on drawing castles. I promised to learn the names of these things. But
The ramparts.
ramparts, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Did you guys ever see that video of those ladies who had to go to the bathroom and then they got stuck in the castle in Scotland overnight? It's a true story. I know that would be me. That would be me. I would be like, I just had to go to the bathroom and then all of a sudden I'm locked in to a castle.
I saw that. I did see that the other day.
That's maybe why we should have a 5-minute break in the middle of the 2 hours.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
You're all welcome to take breaks. I would never stop you from that. But also, you're not captive here. I mean, they did get out. They started, they had no cell service to anywhere, but they saw a little kid and they shouted at the child. Thank God they were somewhere where it was an English speaking country, right? But the kid went and got help, and then the fire department came, and the fire department had to help them break down the castle walls, like in the inside. Just crazy, funny story.
And the name of that top is battlement or crenellated parapet.
Oh, parapet. I knew the crenellation word, but thank you.
And then they've got the solid ones are called merlons, and the lower gaps are called crenels. Who cares?
That's a lot of info. That's good, though. Good to know. Thank you.
Well, parapet's good enough.
Yeah. So, I mean, from here, you could decide really how important it is to you or how much time you have and like what kind of shading you want to do. Because you can add more detail or mass to it if you want to. You could also, create some brickwork or maybe some little bit of detail to give an idea of, the texture of these old castle walls and that kind of thing. And then obviously you could erase your horizon line out of the picture. But this is in general how I do it. If I only had 2 minutes to capture this, I'll show you how I would do it faster. I would just go for it. I would just go and I would try to capture, just like with a gesture drawing, I would try to capture more the character than anything else. And so here you can see what I'm utilizing here is more of internal contour lines. And I'm not really worrying too much sighting wise or getting it all right. Now, you obviously could find a happy medium between these two and figure out how to do both. But if you really only had a couple of minutes and you just wanted to, and I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm like always finding that I have no time to draw what I want to draw, but I'm somewhere and I want to capture it. And I don't always want just to take a photograph. So I would just do it like this. I would try to get, some of the interesting features in there. And you could always change the thickness or quality of lines to suggest some of the shading if you wanted to kind of get that in there real quick. Scribble, And then we've got a couple of these up here, a couple of these here. And this might not be your way of drawing, and I understand that, but this can be a really great basis for another drawing. Because you've really captured the character more than anything else. And then in here, you could put a few bricks. So just like you might not put, every shadow or whatever, you maybe want to put a few bricks in there to suggest these old bricks. Maybe there's other details, like if you're drawing a church, maybe you want to get the cross. Maybe that's the most important thing to you is to get that cross. And so that might be enough, if you only have a minute or two. Get some overlap. But that to me would be like very satisfactory if I only had a minute or two to draw things. So, and it's basically just doing what we did when we did the honey dripper and other things, just going in and out.
What about the reflection in the water?
I think for me, I would probably be tempted to just do that in watercolor, you know, but I didn't think about
Yep.
drawing it. But if you wanted to draw it, you could. I would just do it more like this. Sorry, you guys. I would hint at it. There's also like a little bit of more detail here, right? Before you get to the moat, there's the edge of the moat, those little stone walls over here. So something like that, maybe. And that's up to you again, how detailed you would make it. It might be confusing. But for me, it's okay because usually for me, it's just a drawing to think about, like capturing the space I was in, but also like to do a painting from it, you know. I might use it to do a further painting. So usually all I want is like a little gesture drawing and then some color notes. So I might want to put some color notes in this guy. And in the next lesson, we're going to be talking about line and wash. And we're going to be doing some line and wash work, as well as talking about quality of line. And so this for me is like the ultimate line and wash. It's just sort of a doodle with some color notes. And you could be more explicit with your color notes. But these are real general. Sometimes I'll put color notes just in little squares. Yeah. So let's see how you guys did. This actually looks better in person than it looks on the screen. Maybe I'll hold that up. Kind of wishy-washy with the color. Needs some punching up, but
Nice.
that's that one. And then this is this one. And I like this one because it has more of a graphic feeling to it. But if I only had a minute or two, and this one seems more completed because I got the whole thing in there, whereas I didn't on that one. So I'll let you guys finish up and I'll let you know what's coming next. And then we can do some sharing if you would like. So, oops, let me close that. So it's giving me a hard time. Wants me to share. Okay. All right. So.
You make it look really, really easy.
Because
but it's not.
Yeah. So the reminder is over time with practice, the methods, the citing, the way that you find best, like maybe you find it best to draw shapes first and then to do a contour. For me, I find it easier to like do a vertical, drop a vertical and kind of get the sense of scale, and then to draw a horizontal, then draw another vertical. Over time, you will figure out what's easiest for you, what feels instinctual for you. And I think you'll only need them for the tricky stuff, you know? Like this is a tricky one here because it's all overhead. So I needed to really draw this one out. But over time, I found that I don't need to draw too much detail. I just sort of go for it and do a little bit of citing. So I'm going to give you guys some homework that has to do with doing some of these building drawings, also some storytelling and arrangements, and if you wish to do some further exploration into the 8 basic principles of design and perspective. Okay, So I'm going to give you guys some reference images because you asked me to last time. I listened and I put numbers or letters by them actually. So you're going to have 30 minutes to use reference A. So here's reference A. This is purposely chosen as a picture where you could have many different stories to tell and many different compositions. This is up here, by the way. And I want you to choose a story that you want to tell, a format. So what will your frame look like? And then sketch a composition today using some of the tools and the rules that we learned today. Then I want you to reset your timer and do a second composition, a different one. You have to change at least one thing. So you could change your story. You could change the format. So maybe you did it as a landscape and now you do it as a square, okay, or a vertical portrait. And then I want you to sketch a composition again. And I want you to write down on the margins or on the back of these two drawings that you do what your story is it open or closed, and what compositional tools and rules you chose to use. And if you want to put why, that's great too. Okay, so that's your first set of homework. Your second set of homework is optional, is to watch a video on depth and landscape and follow along. It's a 23-minute long video, or you can use the 2 reference photos below and sketch them using the method we just used, which is citing. Okay. So there are 2 of them here. One is a landscape. The other is a building. And this will all be in your homework email. Your third homework is to sketch 10 to 20 small drawings of structures. Okay. It's preferred that you just go outside and do them from life. But if you can't get outside, you can do them from photos. Okay. That's up to you. And I want you to use that sort of contour method where we just kind of go around, in and around the edges. I find your subjects don't have to be castles. They can be houses in Long Beach or wherever you are. They can be a bridge maybe that is outside your window. They can be storefronts. I like lifeguard stations because there's a lot of negative space. I find it works best if you change your angle up. So if you're doing 10 to 20 drawings, let's say you pick 10, you can draw 3 of the same building just by changing your angle up. Just move and be looking at it from a different angle, okay? Try not to do everything flat head on without drawing any of the third dimension. So your drawing should have some element of depth to the structure, okay? And I want you to do, quick studies. Don't spend a lot of time doing them. So here's, I always do lifeguard studies, and I've done a lot of paintings from these studies. So these are really quick. They are not anatomically, architecturally correct. They're just gesture drawings. And you can see how I'm showing the third dimension. So they're not all, like there's one here where it's flat on facing me. Sorry, there's 2 really where they kind of are. And the other ones you can see by the shading, there is a third dimension. They're very simply shaded too, by the way. They're not complicated. Okay. So that's your homework. Next week, we're going to be covering line and wash. So we'll be ready with your questions and homework. You're going to be able to bring your watercolor paint kit if you like. You really only need 1 or 2 colors, but you can bring it all with you. And this is what line and wash is. Line does the bulk of the work, and then the wash adds the fun. It's really great way to draw and also be able to utilize your color. Okay, so that's it, you guys. Ended on time and everything.
Thank you.
Welcome. Does anyone have any questions?
I do, Anne. And that first assignment, is it the same picture photo? We do 2 different ways?
Yeah, it's the challenge is to find 2 ways to interpret the same photo.
Using pencil or charcoal or whatever?
Yes.
Okay.
Pencil or ink, preferably.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
You're welcome. What did you guys think about the buildings? Did anyone sort of learn something new from how to approach drawing buildings without using your ruler all the time and measuring everything super carefully? And
they looked so complicated. They were actually so simple to draw. It wasn't really that hard.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good. So you thought they look complicated? Yeah, they do at first. They can be intimidating, right? But if you just sort of just use the methods we've used before.
Especially the related parapets.
And we learned some new words too. Did you want to share what you did, Chris? You can if you'd like.
Oh.
You don't have to.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So simple. So nice.
Very nice.
You used like a scribble method to get the tops, to get that crenellation. You weren't even like literally getting the shapes. You were just gesturing them.
Well, I drew them first with a pencil and then I scribbled over with the crayon.
I love it. So when you do that, yeah, I love crayon. When you draw it first with a pencil, you can get the general shape, right? And then you can decide to go in and then give it more character.
Yeah, there's not enough value with just the pencil, so then you have to do it really heavy or use color or something. So yeah, or you said character, so value characters is still lacking. So that's what makes it like, if I just like at the last minute I put those black things and I was like, yeah, there we go. Now I needed a dark line.
Yeah, and also the windows, like the size and shape of windows and other little architectural details can really give you a sense of character of a building, you know, almost like it's a person and you're putting the eyes and nose and mouth in.
Yeah, especially for a castle, you just need those little skinny windows and it's like, oh, castle.
You can't get out of those windows. It's great. Is there anyone else who has had any learnings or wants to share anything?
I like doing it with just pencil and just funky shading and stuff. So
good.
But I mean, I can see adding color too. I don't know.
Yeah, I just feel like almost always I want to add color because I love color so much. It's like a temptation for me to do a drawing and not add color to it.
Yeah.
It's a choice.
Yeah, I can see that.
I can do a fully fleshed out drawing without using color. I just don't want to usually.
Yeah.
Even when I just use the color strategically, like I did behind the cat, I still always feel like it just needs something.
Yeah. I can see. Yeah, I'm sure it needs some color, but I'm okay with it.
Personal choice. Anybody having trouble with this one? Hold that thought. Yeah, Ginny.
Do you have time to do one of those weird man drawings?
Oh yeah. Thanks for reminding me. I do. Weird. I think I should stop the recording. So I'm gonna stop the recording for that. Okay. I feel like it gets us into
some of those don't even know where to start.